All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining the League of Women Voters of Butte County Candidate Forum for the U.S. House of Representatives District 1 race. With us this evening are candidates Rose Yee, Tim Geist, and Matt Steiner. Mr. LaMalfa is not present tonight. He did not respond to our invitation. We at the League do not endorse or oppose political candidates or parties, but we passionately believe this effort to engage and educate voters through candidate forums is critical to our democracy. That's why we do this as often as we can. A few facts about the office. Each congressional representative is elected to a 2-year term, serving the people of a specific congressional district. We are District 1. Among other duties, representatives introduce bills and resolutions, offer amendments, and serve on committees. The number of representatives with full voting rights is 435, a number set by Public Law 62-5 on August 8, 1911, and in effect since 1913. The number of representatives per state is proportionate to the population. The yearly salary is $174,000. We thank the candidates for running for office and in advance for maintaining civil discourse even when you disagree. Because of the webinar format, there will be no audience questions. We cannot respond to raised hands. Our ground rules are no prepared notes and respect for the time limit. We will allow you to finish a sentence, but if you, as one of our moderators said a couple of forums ago, start doing a Hemingway sentence, we will cut you off. Tim McNulty is our timekeeper and will change his screen to the time remaining to let you know how much time you have. For this forum, it is a 2-minute opening, questions with 1-minute responses, and a 2-minute closing. The initial order for candidate responses was randomly determined. So let's begin. I will just clarify for the candidates that your time begins when you start speaking, not when I ask the question. Otherwise, you'd never have any time. If you need me to repeat a question, I'm happy to repeat a question. A couple of them are a little bit long. So we'll begin with our 2-minute opening statements. And Ms. Yee, you are up first. Please begin.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you to the League of Women Voters of Butte County. Thank you to those who are attending today. I am Rose Penelope Yee, and I'm running an independent campaign for Congress. As we go through this forum, I would like to invite you to take these 3 pointers in mind. The first one is a vision for our future. Why I'm running? It's because the American dream is alive. I'm here today. I'm an immigrant from the Philippines, and I have managed to run a successful financial consulting business. And yet, for many of us, the American dream has been more and more and more out of reach. And so that brings me to point number 2. Where we are right now is we are in a class war. Yes, you heard that right, a class war. And it is a war between our interests, yours, mine, the vast majority of the American people, versus that of corporate interests that control both parties, the Democrats and the Republicans. And that's why I'm running as an independent. And the third point then is that we have power, you have power. If we take ourselves out of the box of the red and the blue, then we can look for ways that we can make this country great and that we can achieve the American dream for more and more of our American citizens. Thank you.
So before I move on, I don't know whose dog is barking, but when you're not speaking, if you can mute yourself.
Sorry, that was ours. And I was speaking.
I figured it was unavoidable. All right, thank you, Mr. Geist.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters. My mom was a member of the League of Women Voters. This organization has a special place in my heart. Thank you very much for putting this on. So fair warning tonight, I will employ some surprising humor. I'm Tim Geist, a Republican standing up for strong borders, strong economy, strong democracy. There is a serious national security threat and a solution. Love of fellow Americans, even when we disagree. is the precious glue that binds our democracy together. I'm promoting a unique law to give the emotional advantage to congressional truth tellers. A YouTube video titled "Law to Grab Vicious Political Liars by Their Tender Parts and Squeeze" explains the idea. Without truth, my party, the Republican Party, is becoming a Republican Party of the betrayed, led by its traitors. Now, I want to be able to forgive certain congressman in office today, I'm not going to mention his name, for giving into the evil business model that brings in billions of dollars every year by spreading lies to evoke fear and hate of fellow Americans over policy debates. I would like to be able to vote for a certain incumbent, but first he must confess the lies he will not address and the damage he has bred into our democracy. My name is Tim Geist. I'm a Republican running for Congress. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Steiner, your 2-minute opening.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the League and those in attendance today, and those who will watch this in the future. My name is Max Steiner. I am the Democratic candidate for Congress here in CD1. I am running because maybe like the others, I'm unhappy with the status quo. Obviously, we have different plans, we have different diagnoses, we have different solutions, but all of us are here because we're unhappy with the status quo, and the status quo is not here. So I'll let that speak for itself. But a little bit about me. I was born in Sacramento. I live in Chico with my wife. After high school in Sacramento, I joined the Army. I did 2 years in Iraq as a U.S. Army infantryman. I saw combat. I served this country. I defended our Constitution overseas. I then got out. I joined the reserves. I'm at 17 years of total military service. After college, I joined the Foreign Service. I served as a diplomat in Honduras, in Mexico, as a peacekeeper in Egypt, and as an ag officer in Washington, D.C. I'm running today this year because I think that our system is broken. We had a president who tried to steal a presidential election. Donald Trump refused to yield. That is what our democratic system is built on. That when you lose, you say, I have lost, I'm going to change my policies and try again in 4 years. But that's not enough, right? That's why I'm running. That's why I think that this election is so important, because our constitutional rights are on the line, just like we saw yesterday, or Monday, when we saw the leaked Supreme Court draft that will take away reproductive rights from American women. But I think there's more we can do in this district than Doug LaMalfa has done. I think we need to focus on forestry. We need to thin our woods. We need to reintroduce prescribed fire. We strengthen the timber industry. We need to fix our water situation. We need to make our area resilient to climate change so that we can ensure a better generation, a better America for those who come after us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, and we'll begin with our questions. And as I said, if you need me to repeat a question, please feel free to ask. Question 1, water is a critical issue in California and in District 1 especially, and groundwater sustainability especially. What role should you as a congressional representative play to support all members of the district during these tough times for water? And Mr. Geist, we will begin with you.
Water is essential for life. There's 70% water in our bodies. We are water. We need water. We need more water. We need more water storage. Now, if we were to build more dams and store more water, we could not only have more water to use, provide for cheaper food, but also it's an opportunity to generate energy, surplus energy, which could lower our electricity costs, for example. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Steiner, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm starting to really like Tim, by the way. So that's fine. Tim, I think that we need to build more storage, and that comes down to surface storage. It's a proven technique. We haven't built a large dam in California since 1979 with New Melones. It's time to build Sites Reservoir. I think the federal government should fund it 100% if California is unwilling to do so. They've already committed to 25%. I think we should look at raising Shasta Dam. Listen, with climate change, we are going to have more erratic rainfall. And we're going to have, longer periods of drought. In 2018, the Oroville Dam almost overtopped. Now it's out of water. That means we need more storage. All right, we need to focus on making our area resilient to climate change. And, you know, I think that there are many people that want to use water, but we need it for agriculture. We need it for our cities. We need it for environmental purposes. And any water solution that doesn't include increasing capacity is not a solution. It is a pipe dream.
Ms. Yee, over to you.
So I agree, water is very important and water storage definitely. But maybe before that, we need to look at conservation measures, right? We need to see how water delivery systems need to be retrofitted. What are the leakages in the system? How can we save water within the current distribution system that we have? And then we address storage, we address all the others. And even before that, we also need to take a step back and see how climate change is affecting the fact that California is in a drought. So it's not just addressing the symptoms of why we have a water shortage, but really looking at the causes. And yes, looking at the causes and addressing them might take a long time, might take, you know, it's hard work, but it needs to be done. And I, as your congressperson, will do it.
Thank you. Moving on to question number 2. There is significant federally owned and managed land in District 1. What will you do to navigate the impact of wildfires? And we will begin with Mr. Steiner.
Thank you for the question. This is the central plank of my campaign. Many of you may not know that my brother lost his house to the car fire in 2018 in Reading. And obviously we just lost Paradise in that same year here in Butte. So what do we do about public lands, right? I think the public lands have been undermanaged since the end of the timber industry. I think it's time to refocus the Forest Service on managing forests. And that means managing forests in an economically productive and safety enhancing way. So we're going to need to restart the timber industry. We're going to need to, you know, like make land management agencies into those land management agencies again. One of my platforms is to combine Bureau of Land Management. It is to shift the U.S. Forest Service into Department of Interior, along with Bureau of Land Management and National Park Service. I think that's a better organizational structure than the current situating U.S. Forest Service under the Department of Agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Yee, over to you.
So I am really fortunate in the fact that I have Gifford Pinchot III, the grandson of our first Forest Service director, as my advisor for forest management. And I believe that in terms of forest management, we need to be proactive. And proactive means that we look at how do we mitigate fires, like what fire suppression measures can be done more than what has been done in the past. And in terms of being in Congress, that's where we decide how much we will put into these measures. And so I would look at increasing the budget of the Forest Service and really being proactive. And in terms of like specific actions, like prescribed burning, right? So we look at our indigenous communities and see how they manage fires before and learn from them. And I think that will get us through. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Geist, over to you.
Well, I must say, he may be a member of a different party, but I'm very impressed with Max's ideas. He's been very comprehensive. Actually, we just heard that. I would add that, you know, brush clearing, while it's a micro idea, is also very important. The undergrowth has built up over the years in these unburnt out areas, and we should employ more people and clear that out. The brush could be made into an alternate energy source as well. Other than that, it's hard to top Max Steiner's main plank, I have to admit.
Thank you. On to question 3. California and a growing number of states have various levels of legalization of cannabis use. What is your position for federal level legalization and why? And I will start with Ms. Yee.
I am for the legalization legalization of cannabis or marijuana. I believe that there are too many health benefits that can accrue to people who need it, especially those who are suffering from cancer. I regrettably have family members who have passed away from cancer. I am on the board of Pink Panda Social Finance, where a portion of the proceeds are given to cancer charities. And so just by the fact that it can alleviate suffering in a lot of our fellow citizens who are suffering from cancer, I believe that it should be legalized.
Thank you. Mr. Geist, over to you.
Yes, well, I believe it's important not to feed criminal gangs the revenue that they got when marijuana was widely illegal. That's a bad thing. Clearly, there are medical uses for marijuana. I've heard of it also being useful for some children that have chronic seizures. So there is definitely some good things about it. I will say socially, there are some bad things about it. Also, it tends to make people dumb and lazy. So, but I do not believe it should be criminalized. We should not be supporting criminal gangs. And so therefore I'm for legalization of marijuana.
Thank you. And Mr. Steiner, over to you.
Yes, so I also support the federal legalization of marijuana. So let's break it down by three. First, consumers. So I believe in consumer choice when the product is not really deadly. So we allow cigarettes, we allow alcohol. These have a lot of social problems, but we trust Americans to enjoy their liberties responsibly. And we are a nation of liberties. Number two is production. So when it is federally illegal to grow marijuana, but legal at a state level, you're kind of in this twilight zone, and it's terrible. I've been to many county board of supervisor meetings where people complain about illicit grows, where basically you have cartels growing marijuana and using this twilight zone, this gray zone legality to grow marijuana in ways that don't comply with federal agricultural regulations. It's terrible. And number three is about criminality. If we make this legal, legal companies will do it. Trying to ban something only leads to a prohibition type deal where the mob runs the liquor industry. And we've seen that now with cartels running the marijuana industry.
Thank you. Question number 4. Rural communities, like those that make up District 1, depend on the Postal Service for many things. What will you do to ensure ongoing, reliable, and efficient service for District 1 residents? And Mr. Geist, we will start with you.
The last Postmaster General was a disgrace, taking apart mail sorting machines. That bothered me deeply, trying to make the system less efficient. That's criminal. We need to make, we should have 7-day-a-week postal service. I think that's essential for a strong economy. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Steiner, over to you.
Yeah, so the post office is the part of the federal government that most Americans interact with the most times in their lives. It's very important that we make sure that it is strong, that it is healthy. There was a recent law passed that really strengthened U.S. post office finances. I support ongoing moves in that regard. I think the post office should offer banking services. Maybe that's a related question. I think the post office should offer postal IDs to offset any potential you need a voter ID to vote. I think there should be a federal postal ID with a face on it. I think the post office can do a lot more for this country, and I'd like to see it grow. And I support our postal office employees. I support every American that uses the post office, and that means I support every American. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Ms. Yee, over to you.
So as a business person, I know that the post office is important to small businesses. So it's not just to our fellow citizens, but also to our small business people as well, business owners, that is. And when we look at the post office, we look at the leadership, right? And I think we need to start with the leadership before we can have all these improvements that Max had mentioned, that I approve of all of them. The current Postmaster General, I believe, is not serving the interests of the American people. He is serving his own corporate interest. And that harks back to what I said, point number 2, it's our interest versus corporate interest. And as your representative, I will make sure I will do everything in my power to help correct and install leadership that is transparent at the post office. Tim, I think you like the notion of transparency, so we agree on that.
I stand corrected. Yes, I did say that, didn't I?
Thank you. All right, on to question number 5. Economic development is much discussed in rural areas, but fast and reliable internet is critical to the success of any development. What would you do to improve connectivity in Northern California? And we will begin with Mr. Steiner.
Thank you. So first, I'll push back a little bit on the question. You don't need fast and reliable internet for any development. We used to have a thriving timber industry with no internet, and we could have that again. That said, broadband makes everything easier. It is now the juice that makes the world go round. And yes, I think that we should have a program that facilitates broadband access, much like we had a rural telephony program that rolled out telephone wires to every household in the United States over the 30s, 40s, and 50s. This is very important. Communications tie the United States together. Access to online classes became very important during COVID, access to online news. It's not all about, can I watch Netflix at night, right? I mean, broadband is so much more important, both for economic vitality, for self-improvement, and just for connectedness. And our democracy relies on people having access to information, and broadband makes that easier.
Thank you. Ms. Yee.
So I believe that broadband is actually very essential to a functioning democracy. We saw during the pandemic how when the shutdown occurred, especially with schools, how children needed to have access, online access in order to do their lessons, right? And teachers needed to reach out to those students. It's so important. I live in an area in Redding, somewhat rural, where we don't have broadband. And so I live that experience of, I know what it's like not to have broadband services. And, we need to look at innovative solutions, right? Like Starlink by Elon Musk. As your representative, I am happy to talk to him and see how we can bring Starlink services, more of Starlink services, and prioritize our rural districts, especially here in District 1.
Thank you. Mr. Geist, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, well, in the Old West, I guess the second half of the 19th century, they called the the revolver the great equalizer. I think in modern times, broadband is the great equalizer for democracy, equally informs everybody, also misinforms people. So there is that point as well. I think that's essential. Additionally, economically, there's much more economic opportunity. So many jobs now can be done from home thanks to broadband. I think we need to equalize that service throughout the 1st Congressional District. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, question number 6 is our longest worded question, so bear with me as I get all the way through it and feel free to ask me to repeat parts of it. Okay. On Monday, a draft opinion was leaked from the US Supreme Court in which a majority of the justices overrule Roe v. Wade and send the decision on whether and in what circumstances a woman may enter pregnancy to the people and their elected representatives. Assuming this will be the final decision of the court, what is your reaction? And do you believe that Congress should have a role in this issue going forward? And we'll begin with Ms. Yee.
As a woman, that is very central to my belief that a woman should have autonomy over her body. And so reproductive rights is very, very important to me. As your representative, I will help in whatever way I can, lobby, walk in the streets, protest, in order for women to have reproductive rights. And I think that it is high time that Democrats come to grips and really really live up to their promise of codifying Roe versus Wade. They've had 49 years. I don't blame Republicans because Republicans have always been against it, but Democrats who say they are for it need to be taken to task on why for 49 years they have done nothing as a party for that.
Thank you. Mr. Geist, over to you.
It's a very difficult question, and I must say this is one thing I feel a little unqualified to say because it's not really my body we are talking about here. But in democracy, we look for a mean, a central, a golden mean. Let's look at some extremes here, if you allow me to be clinical. For example, a woman carries a fetus for 9 months, her water breaks, and she changes her mind and wants an abortion. Is that too late? Clearly, that's too late. How about the day before that? Because at this point, we're talking about obviously two people, aren't we? If we go back a day or 10 minutes before the water breaks, is it too late? I think it is. Now let's look at the other extreme. Some people think that life begins on conception. Well, sometimes after the male and female DNA, sometimes it turns into something that is not even human. Is a woman supposed to carry that for the rest of her the term? I think that's a problem too. I would say we should cut it off at the first trimester. Excuse me for going over time.
I know you. I saw you see it. Thank you. All right, Mr. Steiner, over to you.
Yeah, I apologize in advance. I'll go over time. You're compressing this into a minute. So I'm Roman Catholic. I think abortion is murder and it's a tragedy. And I think that most Americans share the view that abortion, that losing a fetus is a tragedy. But we are a nation of laws and we are a nation of liberties and we have a constitution. And what we saw on Monday night was the Supreme Court that is not devoted to law, that is an ideological, partisan Supreme Court. And their decision, if it stands, will be a miscarriage of justice. It should not be allowed to stand. If I am sent to Congress, I will try to push long-term resolutions, right? A constitutional amendment guaranteeing the right to privacy. I will push short-term legislation, such as moving every military base in a state that outlaws abortion out of those states. That is the prerogative of the Department of Defense. It is the prerogative of Congress using the power of the purse. I refuse to send American servicewomen to states that will not give them the right to an abortion when those servicewomen are fighting for their rights as a member of the military. So obviously there's more to say on this, but as someone in the military and as someone who fought for this Constitution, right. Thank you.
I understand some of these questions, we could go on all day, but we work with what we have. All right. Question number 7, much shorter than question number 6, I promise. Maybe not the answers, but the question. Are you satisfied with the way the federal government has handled the COVID-19 epidemic, particularly in its impact on Northern California? If not, what would you have done differently? And we will begin with Mr. Geist.
I must say that it was handled pretty well after the last presidential election. Although Mr. Biden was very lucky to inherit the chance for inoculation against the disease. So that was great. And that's one great thing that Donald Trump did for the United States was he put lots and lots of money into the research, backed many horses, and we got some excellent vaccinations. I'm for freedom of choice. I think now that everybody has an opportunity for his vaccinations outside of children below 5 years old, that mask mandates should go away, with the exception of protecting children. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Steiner, over to you.
So I'll just do broad strokes. So I think mask mandates made a lot of sense. We did not have a vaccine. Like Tim, I think the mask mandates make very little sense now. We have vaccines. I encourage everyone to get a vaccine. I have had 2 doses of vaccine. I've had a booster. I've had no impact. I don't get 5G out of my head either. So that conspiracy theory debunked. But you can lead a horse to water and you can't make it drink. We're not going to stay locked down because 50% of Americans refuse to get a vaccine that's good for them. I think we closed down schools for far too long. I think we will see the educational impacts of remote learning, negative impacts over the next 10 years, and maybe it'll be generational. We always need to weigh costs and benefits. I think a zero COVID mindset was a disaster in California, especially for far too long. It's a disaster in China now. We're going to have to live with this. All right. We get a COVID shot every fall. COVID is here to stay. It is deadlier than the flu, and I encourage everyone to get vaccinated.
Thank you. Ms. Yee, over to you.
So let's look at this from both the personal as well as the institutional angles, right? On a personal angle, my two sisters are doctors, and they did recommend masks before we had vaccines, and they also did recommend vaccinations. But I want to be intellectually consistent, and if I am against the state's right to control my body, I am also against vaccine mandates. I think Americans should have the freedom to choose whether they should have the vaccine mandate or not. On the other hand, how the federal government handled it is really atrocious, in my opinion. America should have, or the United States should have done something like what Canada did in terms of income replacement for the citizens during the lockdown. That would have helped alleviate the suffering of a lot of our working people. Biden and President Trump could have done emergency Medicare for all. And I'll stop there.
Thank you. All right, question 8. What role, if any, does Congress have in supporting the development of affordable housing in mid-sized cities like Chico and rural areas like Butte County? What ideas do you have for increasing access? And I'll expand that to just District 1 in general. I'll modify the person's question a little bit. What role, if any, does Congress have in supporting the development of affordable housing in District 1? And what ideas do you have for increasing access to affordable housing while at the same time protecting the interests of existing homeowners and residents? And feel free to ask me to repeat that, but we'll start with Mr. Steiner.
Thank you. I don't mean to dodge the question, but the federal government has almost zero role in affordable housing. There is some housing and urban development block grants to encourage states and counties and cities to make those kinds of rules. So I'll just say that no, this isn't really going to be something the federal government solves. If you're hoping that the federal government will solve affordable housing in California, then your hope's in vain. That said, what I would do, were I running for a state level position, is I think that we need to build a lot more houses. I think trying to build affordable housing is a mistake. We did not have expensive houses in the United States historically because we built nice houses, and those nice houses people moved into, and the medium houses that they moved out of became affordable. And so the answer to this is simple: supply and demand. We will need to build more housing. I would love for it to be denser. I think it's great. I live in a part of Chico that is very dense. But we have more Americans and they will buy houses. And we are not going to get to an answer here just by hoping that only building affordable housing will solve the affordable housing crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will clarify that the first part of the question was, what role, if any, does Congress have in supporting that? And so you did in fact answer. So since it was a longer question, I feel comfortable repeating that first part for the benefit of both you and the other two candidates. So Ms. Yee, on to you.
So the problem that we have is that the current economic system is so unequal that we have empty high rises in New York, like millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of apartments that are empty because they are investment properties by billionaires, while we have a lot of unhoused in our rural as well as in our cities. And I think when we say that Congress can't do something, I think we need to really look for ways where Congress can do something. As your representative, I will look at ways where we can maybe have a structured program where the federal government in some ways can lower interest rate for first-time home buyers, or if there are ways that down payments can be waived and yet interest rates would still be lower. Or we can, if there's a way that Congress can pass laws that require developers to have more low-income housing. I'm sorry, the stop sign is there. It's really bothersome.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Geist, over to you.
I do agree with Max Steiner that it is California's problem, an important problem. But California's problem, one thing that California could do would be to decrease regulations, decrease, the cost of permits, for example. We could reinvigorate the lumber industry in the first district. That would also be very useful and hopefully would bring down the cost of materials for building houses, which is extremely high currently. So we need to, as Max said, increase supply. There's plenty of demand already. But yes, Congress, I don't think they have a dog in this fight. It's up to California to do it. It's part of really California's success, really, as a great economy, is there are lots and lots of rich people that have lots of money to spend on housing. And that puts a lot of hardworking people that work with their hands out of luck. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. All the candidates, I think, have touched on the subject of our next question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Many people believe political divisions in our country are getting more extreme, and it is harder for people with differing opinions to find common ground. If you are elected, what would you do to change that? We will begin with Ms. Yee.
So I'm already mirroring the change by running as an independent, Claire. So I'm neither a Democrat nor a Republican. I think that the current system that we have of red versus blue just further divides us. That what we actually need to do is to really, stop demonizing the other person. Maybe we should stop watching MSNBC, stop watching CNN, stop watching Fox News, because mainstream media just fuels that division between us. It gets brother against brother, father against son, and that can't be. I mean, our neighbors are Republicans, and they're great neighbors. We love them, they love us, we help each other out. We need to go out more into the community and talk to each other and not let the fact that somebody's blue or somebody's red be a division.
Thank you. Mr. Geist, over to you.
There's a highly profitable business model that takes advantage of the way people are built. They spread lies to evoke hate, and that short circuits people's thinking. And that way they're able to extort money from them emotionally. We have a limbic system, old brain, that controls our emotions. On top, we have the cerebral cortex that's responsible for our rational, logical thinking. The thing is, cerebral cortex spends most of its time trying to please the primitive part of our brain, the limbic system. And that is the secret to the business model that takes advantage of people. It short circuits them. It makes them more likely to give up their money and give their loyalty to people that evoke fear and hate, particularly when it comes to leadership. It blinds us. And I propose a law that can deal with that. A law that allows, that I'll get to in my closing.
Thank you. Mr. Steiner, over to you.
Yeah, I think there's two primary drivers of extremism in this country. One is increasingly bifurcated news. We are people that increasingly pick our news sources rather than live somewhere with one paper of record. That's led to a huge proliferation of news sources that tell people what they want to hear rather than the truth. And it creates these bubbles. And it's bipartisan. Obviously, I see it more up in District 1 from the right, but it creates these bubbles of misinformation that don't actually increase knowledge. The second big problem is that we increasingly have partisan districts. Part of this is because people are self-sorting. Liberals, Democrats, they tend to move to big cities, and Republicans tend to move to rural areas. But part of it is also who draws the lines, right? And we have districts that are increasingly dark red or dark blue, and you don't get politicians that have to reach across the aisle to win a majority. And that means that people don't have political role models. The Blue Dog Democrats are dead. The Gang of 14 doesn't exist. This is a problem going forward.
Thank you. All right, question 10. What issue do you believe is not getting enough attention? And what would you do to change that if elected? Mr. Geist, we'll start with you.
I love this question. The law that I was referring to earlier would allow a congressman who is truthful to challenge a congressman who is a liar. This law provides a risk opportunity for a truthful congressman to become a hero by putting their own lives on the line, by challenging a lying congressman to also put his own life on the line in support of his specific untrue statement. If the challenge is accepted, they would both go to a federal court. One of them would go to prison for lying. That is a dramatic mitigation. That will be a dramatic mitigation of future lying in Congress. If people know that they are going to be challenged and embarrassed for not accepting the challenge. And it will not violate the First Amendment of the Constitution because it has to be voluntary. It's based on perjury statutes. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Steiner, over to you.
Yeah, can I take a moment and just ask if we're going to have a question about foreign affairs? Because if not, I would definitely use this to talk about that.
I have no question about foreign affairs on my list that I received.
Great. Well, I think that one issue that District 1 needs to think more about is foreign affairs, right? So that I'll start with that. Listen, we are one of the highest recruit generating congressional districts in the country. I think we're number 3 in California. A lot of our neighbors, I am one of them, I'm in the reserves, they join the military. And we need to understand that District 1's interests, they don't stop at the Yuba County line or at the Oregon border. Our Americans' interests don't stop at the Mexican border or at 10 miles out at sea. Listen, we are in a global world. There is a war in Europe. We have a rising China that looks increasingly poised to try to assert its autocratic control over Taiwan by force. America has always been a leader in the world. I am proud to be a citizen of a country that takes on that leadership role, that cares about that leadership role, that is willing to spend the money it takes on its military and diplomatic forces and development to assume that leadership role. And I think we should be proud of that as Americans, but I don't think we can take it for granted. And as your congressman, I will use my foreign policy experience to champion those interests in Washington.
Thank you. Ms. Yee, over to you.
So President Roosevelt said that we need 4 freedoms: freedom of worship, freedom of speech, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. I feel that the one overlooked aspect and not often discussed is that true freedom really requires freedom from want and freedom from fear. And that is based on us Americans having economic rights. Economic rights are never spoken about. It's like we have so many unhoused, we have so many poor people, we have so many people going into drugs because their lives are so difficult, trying to escape their lives. And we need a government that ensures that we have universal basic income. For example, Stockton did an experiment on that was really successful. We need a government that provides us with healthcare. We need a government that provides college and trade schools for youth. We need a government that will cancel student debt. We need a government that would provide federal jobs for those who want to be productive citizens of this country.
Thank you. All right, this will be our final question. You all were very zippy with most of your answers, so we're coming in under time. And I apologize if this question takes the slight wind out of any of your closing statements, but question 11, what would be your first priority if elected? And we will begin with Mr. Steiner.
So I think the first priority of Congress should be to hold congressional hearings and investigate the ringleaders of the January 6th attack on the Capitol, the big lie, and the attempt by the previous presidential administration, ex-President Trump, to steal the 2020 presidential election. I have not been happy with the amount of congressional oversight exercised on that. I think we need to do more. Obviously, I'm running against a man who ignored the results of the presidential election, lied about it on national TV. And then doesn't participate in a debate where he can defend his point of view. But as Americans, we need to understand that our democracy is on the line. And I think that Congress needs to step up to the plate here, and it needs to fight for our Constitution, because if we take it for granted, then we'll lose it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Yee, on to you.
The first priority is to learn how the ropes of Congress work so as to be the most effective congressperson as possible, and to bring transparency to the whole process, and to talk to the people, conduct town halls with our District 1 voters, and let them know what's happening in Washington so that they are aware of why we have the problems that we have. Congress has had the lowest job ratings, right, in the country, or rather, it has the highest disapproval. And that is because we feel that our Congress people are not doing their jobs. And why is this so? And so I, as your congressperson, will fight for your rights, and I will be very, very transparent about who is putting barriers to us and to our interests, and I will make sure that you all know about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Geist, on to you.
I agree with Max Steiner's comment about January 6th. January 6th is why I decided to get into this race. I begin with this premise. There is no freedom without democracy, and there's no democracy without the truth. Without it, we are a republic of the betrayed, led by its traitors, and I have a problem with that. We need to investigate the January 6th things. We need to hold people's feet to the fire, metaphorically speaking. I think it's very important that we get down to what is and is not true, and this is why I feel so passionate about the law I am promoting while I'm running for this office. I think it's essential for increasing the longevity of our democracy. There's something else that people don't talk about is artificial intelligence, and that is coming for our jobs. I think that needs to be discussed more deeply. Vladimir Putin said the first country to master artificial intelligence will rule the world. You can bet your bottom dollar he is weaponizing it right now. I'd like to go on about that maybe at some other time. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you everyone for your thoughtful answers to these questions. We're now going to move on to our 2-minute closing statement. And the candidate order has come back around so that we are once again starting with Ms. Yee for the closing statement. Ms. Yee, you may begin your 2-minute closing statement.
Thank you again, Claire. Thank you to the League of Women Voters of Butte County. Thank you to those who are attending today. Thank you who are watching. Appreciate the time to spend here with you all and with Tim and Max. I just want to leave you all with a vision for a future. We need to have a future that we can believe in. We need to have a future where the American dream is a reality for more and more and more Americans. We need to believe that we can all have this. We need to believe that we can go see a doctor without having fear of being bankrupt. We need to believe that our parents of young kids, parents of youth, and the youth themselves don't have to worry about which college they would have to go to, whether they can afford it or not. We need to believe that, sorry about that, my kid is out of town and he's letting mom know that he's okay, and so he's calling me. We need to believe that, 1 minute, okay. We need to believe that we have student debt cancellation, that our students are not burdened by college or student debt, because that is such a big yoke for them to carry. And we need to believe that when times like the pandemic happens, we have a government that we can depend on, a government that would care for the very least of us. And that really is why I'm running, because I believe that we as Americans deserve to have as good a life as any citizen in Sweden, in Norway, in Denmark, that we as Americans have to have, not just say that we are free, but that we are truly free. And I hope that makes sense to all of you, and I hope that you will unbox yourselves from the red and the blue boxes that the establishment has put us in, and join me in trying to get the American dream achievable for more Americans. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Geist. Your 2-minute closing statement. Sorry.
No problem. I would like to cite an authority for my fellow Republicans and conservative Democrats about healthcare. Matthew 10, verses 8 and 9. Verse 8, heal the sick, cleanse the leper, raise the dead, drive away the demons. Now, doesn't that sound like a great healthcare plan? Verse 9, providing neither gold, nor silver, nor brass for your purses. Now, my comment, do it even if they can't pay. I think that's an excellent ethical standard for universal health care in this country. And if I said that without quoting the Bible, some of my fellow Republicans would call me a socialist. I don't care what you call me. And it's your First Amendment right to call Jesus a socialist if you want. I would not recommend that. I'd also like to talk about the provocative title I used for the YouTube video, to bring attention to a new legal concept that would increase the democracy's survival at a time when its survival is in question. January 6th, for example. This law provides a risk opportunity for truthful congressmen to become heroes by putting their own lives on the line, as I have said. Congressmen who do this will be able to be heroic standards for the truth. We need that. My close is going to include some other unusual attempts to bring attention to this really important issue. Love is the precious glue in our democracy. We must love it even when we lose. You see, we must love it for our democracy to make it a truth and honor, then nothing can break it. Love, the precious glue in our democracy. And I guess I'll stop here. Thank you very much, League of Women Voters.
Thank you. And Mr. Steiner, your 2-minute closing statement.
Yeah, I apologize in advance, or maybe, that's actually good that I'm not going to be singing. So trust me, I'll say that's a blessing to you. But here's the deal. I'm running. I'm the only Democrat in the race. I'd love to get your votes. I'm sure that there are a lot of Democrats on this call. In fact, statistically, we're probably overrepresented on League of Women Voters calls. But you're not going to love me, right? I'm not as great of a politician as Audrey Denny was, but I am a fighter. And I will fight for you in Washington. And you will have heard some answers tonight that you will have disagreed with. I know it because I go to Democratic meetings in Butte. I go to Democratic meetings in Chico. I hear people say, I don't want to build more dams. I hear people say, I don't like that you're pro Second Amendment. But at the same time that I'm going and listening to Democrats, I'm going and listening to the middle. I'm going and listening to Republicans. I've stopped at everyone on the 99 and the 299 that flies a Trump flag in their front yard. Do you know why? Because we need to listen to those people. We need to get their votes. We need to be the party that listens and the party that answers. And for too long, we've been characterized as just, kind of effete city dwellers with no real answers. And that's not who we are. That's not who we are as Democrats. It's not who we are as Americans. And it's not who I am as a former soldier and current Army reservist. All right, like I think that we are at a turning point in American democracy. I think that our district is at a turning point in climate change. We have had these massive fires. I don't want to see our country go up in smoke. I don't want to see our county go up in smoke. I want to go to DC. I want to solve problems, and I will fight for you from the center. And even if you don't love me, I'm going to need your support because this is a tough race. My opponent, Doug LaMalfa, doesn't even want to participate in these things because he thinks he has it in the bag. And I think that our democracy cannot allow people to coast by on an election where they don't even listen to people and don't even answer questions. So
Thank you.
that's my pitch. Thank you.
Thank you. I will say within my memory, that is the first time we've had a candidate sing a portion of their closing statement. So I don't know if you're about to start a trend. We'll see come the general election if anybody's taken the lead on that. So once again, on behalf of the League of Women Voters.
I can sing with you, Tim.
You're on. Let's do it.
No, the forum is over.
But we can still say it's free country, right?
You're not going to be recorded on Zoom.
Well, I'll clear the room though. Like Max, I'll probably clear the room.
So thank you once again on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Butte County. We again thank these candidates for running and participating in tonight's event. This Zoom recording can be found once it's ready at the League of Women Voters of Butte County website, lwvbuttecounty.org, our Facebook page, and on YouTube. We urge everyone to visit and make use of votersedge.org, where you can find information on the candidates, statements by candidates. You can look up your ballot, enter your zip code or your address. It's a great resource, and it really helps voters stay informed. And so once again, thank you. Please vote on June 7th, and good night, everyone.
Good night. Max, Rose,
thank you all.
Jobs, you two.
Thank
Very
you.
nice.
Take care.